Alrighty, everyone, just like that. We're just laughing because I just knocked the table. And but yeah, I'm here with Ray Morcomb. He's been on before, so if you actually haven't listened to that previous episode, you should check it out. Ray, we're going to the story about karate and fighting and all this sort of stuff. And for those that don't know, Ray is you're legally blind, I think.
Yeah, legally blind.
Yep.
Illegally.
Still gets around.
Sometimes illegally.
riding bikes around and
Yeah.
all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I just spilled my coffee too. But anyway, we're here, Ray. Let's go. The reason why we wanted to catch up is because between the last conversation that Ray and I have had, obviously there's been heaps happen.
Yeah,
and it'd be good to talk about some of those stories. So,
sure. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for having me back on your podcast. And your podcast has been going crazy too.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's, as with anything, it's a consistency thing, right?
Yeah.
And I apologize if people think that I'm speaking weird. I am. So one of the things that has happened obviously fairly recently is that I've got braces on my bottom teeth.
Ah, okay.
So I had an issue where my the second molar from the back on my left side had an issue. People might have heard me talk about it on Marco when I did the podcast episode of Marco, and I had to get that tooth taken out. So I had this massive gap in my mouth, and I was like, okay, there's only two ways to fix it. One is to put a dental implant in, and then the alternative is to, because my teeth were a bit crowded anyway, I sort of thought, okay, perhaps this is an opportunity to get my teeth fixed at the same time.
Yeah.
So then, whether rightfully or wrongfully, I opted then to go with the braces, to pull them all across, and then that should hopefully close the gap.
Nice.
But it's just a pain.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've got to lay off the contact for a year.
Yeah.
Not too much of an issue, I guess, not really competing, per se, so to speak, but just, it's just annoying more than anything else.
Yeah, I know. We're at that age.
and it's all, I'll tell you something that I never really thought about was that, like most people when they get braces, they're probably like a teenager.
Yeah.
And they're already feeling a little bit awkward about themselves as they're growing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a 40-year-old man.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get a little bit self-conscious about it. Right?
I know, it doesn't completely go away.
Yeah, right? Like, so it just goes to show, like, no matter how confident you are, like, there are little things that can obviously chip away at your confidence to go and say. And considering, like, how I predominantly make my living is through talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I feel like I've just, got this impediment now, so to speak.
Yeah, but I hear you, brother.
Anyway, talk to us, Ray. Tell us what's going on.
Just got back from Thailand. Well, we had an amazing trip in Thailand. We were originally meant to go over for a fight with Cooper, but that didn't eventuate. So at that point in time, we decided to change into a bit of a family holiday, make the most of it. And Cooper's still come over, and he's still there currently training.
Yep.
And Percy come across as well.
Yep.
So the boys got in some good training. And then from Thailand, it wasn't obviously planned, but Coach Renato contacted me a couple months back now, just with the idea that there's a possibility that a friend of his, Ricky Glenn, really good friend of his, may be fighting on the Perth card for UFC 305. And then obviously he's not available because he's in Europe at the moment, killing it, doing all of his MMA workshops all across country to country to country. His friend was like, if I get on this card, I want you in the corner, obviously, and it'd be a big thing. And Coach contacted me and was like, I'm not going to be available, but I've recommended yourself to go and support and be in the corner, which I couldn't believe, and it all kind of fell into place, and ended up doing that and back home about a week ago.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I think let's go back a bit, because you obviously brought up Coops, right? So Coops had a tough fight.
Yeah, very tough.
And unfortunately, like and this is I guess a place where we can talk about tactics, right? Because you can prepare for a fight in a specific fashion.
Yep.
And you can obviously look at what you do well as a fighter, what your opponent does well as a fighter, and sometimes people just flip the script.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And so his opponent obviously came out with a very different game plan. Just a lot of forward pressure.
Yep.
Didn't really look to strike that much. More look to sort of clinch and then play judo, play wrestling. And Coops unfortunately couldn't get it done by a submission or something this time, like he did with Ortikov.
Yep.
So he took a loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious about your perspective, when you sort of reflect on that experience, right?
Yeah, well, first thing was I said to everyone, don't gamble, because I would have lost a lot of money. Like especially like some of the smaller things, like the week over in Bangkok, he was just on, and the warm up especially. So we did like a lot of warming up, and you can really pick a lot with the fighters. The warm up area is that final little touch, and I think psychologically you get a lot of tells there. Like if someone performs really well or they underperform, often on reflection, that last warm-up area gives you a bit of information, especially from a confidence point of view. And his warm-up was, I'd say it's the best I've ever seen him before he stepped out for a fight. So, I think that he was really caught off guard. I think Coach Renato and I spoke about, I've got an extensive background being in Japan from karate point of view and getting a little bit of that insight in the Japanese culture. And they're very, I won't say like not one-dimensional, that's not the correct word. It's like they're very decisive. Like once they make a plan, they're going to go to that plan to the letter, and they're not going to change. That's one thing. Like even if the plan starts to if it's not working at first, they'll persevere with it until it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But they won't change to that plan. So we had an idea that, we saw his background in his fights, and he predominantly was striking. He had a really powerful right hand. I think he had one submission. You could tell he was a wrestler. You could see from the build of him as well. But he didn't really show that game plan in his previous fights. So I can't say that we underestimated him, because, at that level when you're fighting on one, like you don't underestimate anybody that's fighting, at one championship. But I think it was just, as you said, he just threw the strikes to cover the distance, and he didn't shoot once. I don't think he shot even one time in the 3 rounds. It was just all basically trying to get the body lock, and as you said, the judo.
Upper body,
getting the takedown. And then I think too, like in my personal opinion, I kind of noticed at first with Percy when he fought Ordakov, the ring without having the cage, the cage wrestling, that wall is not there, and that plays a huge role when you're flat on your back, because you just can't get your head and shoulders and work your way up the cage. Instead, you start sliding underneath the bottom rope. Like the ropes are, and it's kind of it's a bit of a shame with one, because Lumpini Stadium, which is an amazing place to go to and experience, but because it's their spiritual kind of home of Muay Thai, they won't allow a cage in there, which is completely fair enough. But then all of their MMA program is in a cage. So everything within one championship is in a cage except for Lumpini. So it's just this kind of little glitch, it's this little thing that you've got to overcome. And the other thing that Cooper really kind of alerted me to is the size of the ring. It's small. It's a Muay Thai ring. So you've got a very, very small area and you've got no cage. So for someone who's predominantly a striker, you've got 2 big problems there, you know. So, and I think that the Japanese team, they put together a fantastic game plan and executed it, and you just learn. You just kind of learn, and what can you do, like we were taken out of the game, you know. So, and Cooper's like, he's an amazing kid. Like, again, these ones they're very genuine article type personalities. He made no excuses, you know what I mean? Like, he had excuses, like, he's always struggling with, sometimes, he's got things that he's struggling with. He was, we're aware of those, but with Cooper, he's always, like most fighters, they're always carrying something, and he didn't use that as an excuse. He just was like, need to get better, need to improve. He wasn't happy with the loss because he's hell-bent on winning all the time. But I think most of the fighters understand in MMA now, the game, like Coach Renato says, the game's constantly changing. It's always evolving. And I think to have this idea in your head that you're going to be undefeated, maybe if you're undefeated, I don't know, like either you're not fighting the top level people, or you're 1 in a million, like a Khabib or something like that. But I think most people understand that losing in MMA is part of the whole process of growing and developing as well. Yeah,
it's very different, because I think the pool of athletes is also, if you think about, I guess, boxing as an example, right? Large amateur scene. Obviously, as an Olympic sport, there's so many clubs that participate, at the amateur level, so that you can get, so many different looks in. You could, rack up, 200 plus amateur boxing bouts, over a short period of time if you're playing at the club level, right? we don't necessarily have a club level for mixed martial arts.
No, exactly. It's a pretty small pool, especially when you look at some of the lower weight classes. Like, when you look at like the flyweights, which both Cooper and Percy are in. Like when you sit down and say, okay, how many active fighters are there within Australia, New Zealand, kind of Australasia area, and how many of them? This is the other problem as well. When you get someone who's quite strong, someone who's quite good, then people don't want to fight them. So you've got a very, very small pool. And then some of them are trying to avoid each other. It's quite tricky, The other thing with boxing is boxing has a history of also, if there's a talented young fighter coming through, the management companies and that, they will in many ways just kind of buy the fights. So sometimes you'll be earning, half or a third of the purse of your opponent just so you can get that person into the ring with you. Yeah. And everyone's kind of aware of it. It's like part of the process. Like, your first kind of 10, 15 fights are people that you've cherry picked.
Yeah. It's to build you.
It's to build you. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of culture hasn't really developed as much in MMA at the moment. I think because as you said, there's not that many people to kind of pick from. You'd have to import them over, and that all costs money. Obviously Asia's the primary area, but it still costs airfares, accommodation, bringing the team out. So you're looking at quite a few $1,000s if you want to try and cherry pick and build your fighters.
Yeah. I've seen that with boxing cards that I've been involved with. There's a team of athletes that have come over from Thailand, and without trying to say this in any rude sort of way, but they're not there to win. No,
exactly. No, they're part of the process. Like they're building them up so they can. And I think it's clever too, because you're trying to, even if you look at someone like, I'm quite a big fan of Tim Tszyu, and if you go back, I always love watching high quality fighters. I love watching their early fights. I think you just find so many interesting things. And if you go back and go onto YouTube and watch Tim Tszyu's first and second pro boxing fights, it's not that he's not good, but you can see how raw he is and how he's kind of throwing some, wild shots and trying to do, he's very, very fresh, very young, and then you can see in those first 10 pro fights how much he develops. It's crazy. It's like by the time he's got through to 10 pro fights, it's a whole different person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just picking up on some of the other things that you said, so fighting in a ring is very different. I think I've always said this, when it comes to mixed martial arts in the ring, you really need jiu-jitsu because you got to fight off your back. You don't have the cage to walk up and do those sorts of things. So having jiu-jitsu will allow you to then work your sweeps, reversals, or submission attempts when you get stuck on bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I think the other interesting part about the ring, the only part that could sort of resemble a cage wall is maybe the corners, the buckles in the corners.
Yes, yep.
That's as close as you're going to get. But then you're operating in it, and you're operating in a 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
With basically no sides. The sides are just they're ropes.
The movement's very
huge, right? Yeah. And it's funny. I don't know if you ever. I've been reading Kobe Bryant's book, The Mamba Mentality.
Yeah.
And it's for if you're a basketball nerd, you probably really appreciate that book. But what I like about seeing that sort of thought process that Kobe applies to basketball is a similar thought process that I like to apply to martial arts. And he was talking about some of the little things that you don't see, right? When it comes to defense, and how you might position your hand so you've got your body between you're blocking the vision of the ref, so that you can maybe hold the other person a little bit harder, with your hands to stop them from just getting away from you. So, people might say, oh, it's a little bit dirty, but it's part of the sport.
Exactly.
Right? And likewise, when you watch the guys who are really, really good in the ring, there's little things where they've hooked the ropes just to get those extra couple of shots, and also, to make it a little bit more difficult for your opponent to get away.
Yeah.
These are those little tricks that, unless you spend a lot of time in the ring, and also you've experienced people who use those tricks.
Yeah.
You don't develop them otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, another example of that was the US fighter Sage Northcott, and he went over to one, and he had that. I don't remember who it was, but
Cosmo.
Had that devastating injury, know, and straight away, not saying I know 100% or whatever, but straight away when I saw it, I just thought, gee, kind of he walked into that almost. And then when I kind of looked at it, I realized that, he's been put into a ring, and when he was getting backed up towards the corner, he just cut straight across the angle.
Yep.
And again, if I was a betting man, I'd probably say that he's had limited time in a boxing ring.
Yep.
He's probably been in an MMA gym from an early stage, just like here at the gym at Rockdale with FFT. Like, the guys are training on the mat or they're training in the cage. So if you don't have that awareness of the ring and in the corner of the ropes, that 90-degree position, it changes the whole ring generalship.
Yep.
So, and yeah, you feel like, okay, I don't want to be trapped in the corner because that's going to be obviously a big problem on the ropes. But if you cut across too early, they cut off the ring. And I feel like that's what happened to him in that fight. And the injury, like the result of that was like horrific, you know, really, really bad. So yeah, you're dead right. Like, the movement gets affected. Lumpini Stadium as well, it's like for what they kind of call like performance Muay Thai. For one championship, they want, you know, small ring, and they want action. Yeah, so in Muay Thai, you know, like especially for a fighter like Cooper, he'd be quite suited to that kind of Muay Thai, smaller ring, high action striking. But when you bring in mixed martial arts, it changes the whole landscape, and it's tricky, you know. And even when you look back at the old footage of like Pride in Japan, that mixed martial arts looked very different to modern day, you know, UFC, Bellator kind of fights. So yeah, it's just different. But again, like, you know, Cooper, he's a cool kid. He makes no excuses. Sometimes, you know, I find the holding and that in the wrestling frustrating, kind of chews the clock. But he's always, you know, we always talk, and I've learned a lot off him over the years as well. And he's always like, that's the game. He's like, you know, you got to get up, you've got to do this. And he's always got a kind of very positive, like a lot of people, if they're struggling or they're in a situation, if they hear an excuse, they jump on it and they're like, yeah. Like, if I was in a cage, I would have won. But he never ever says that. He's always just like, that's not MMA. He goes, that's not why I love the game. He's like, if they are able to hold me down, that's my fault. Like, I've got to do better. I've got to get up. I shouldn't have done this. And he never makes excuses, no matter what. You know, like, he'll talk about maybe an injury or something like that, something that's more kind of matter of fact, like I hurt my foot, I hurt my leg, or something of that nature. But as far as the performance goes, he expects himself to win. He expects to put on a show and light the place up, and he doesn't look for excuses, which I think it's really, you know, shows a lot of integrity. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, most people know it's, you know, a lot of the times it can come down to those moments of who was the better person on the night, right? Who executed the game plan better? Who had the better game plan?
Yeah.
You know, there's all these little nuances that people don't necessarily think about. And even just, you know, when we talk about the ring, like whether it's a ring, whether it's a cage, there are differences between cages.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, just little things in, like, you know, a slightly older cage has a little bit more sag in the fence.
Yes. Yeah.
And that sag in the fence can lead to opportunities for bigger takedowns.
Yeah.
The little, like, sort of bumper at the bottom of the cage. Some cages don't have that. Some cages, like the cage fence, actually goes into the floor, and the matted area is above the bottom of the fence line. But that creates a little gap that, you know, people don't think about. But, like, if you're trying to suck somebody away from the cage, you can actually dig your toes into that little crevice.
Yep, and can use
right?
it.
And you can use it. So, you know, it's funny. I guess, you know, in any battle, so to speak, you know, if we think about fighting as a battle, you really have to look at the landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you got to know what is the landscape that we're fighting in. What's the terrain? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And, you know, and it's not to say that you need to exploit them every single time. You know, like, obviously, there's only so many times you can put your fingers in the cage before you're going to lose a point.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I'm not saying you should do those things, but what I'm saying is, you got to
understand the battleground.
You got to understand the battleground.
Yeah, 100%. You know, another great thing, even from, again, like, finding positives from the loss, like for Cooper, myself, everybody, you know, even everyone that we're, you know, involved with coaching, is that after the fight, the Japanese team, I think the boy's name was Koda, I think it was, they come up, you know, the Japanese are always very respectful. They have that kind of, you know, Budo mentality. But you could see the kid was, like, very emotional. It was a big win for him. And I think that he kind of felt like, you know, the odds were against him. We felt like we'd win the fight. We thought it was just another stepping stone. But one of the things that I really picked up, I spoke to Cooper about, was sometimes you can feel like you're the underdog, but if you put together a really good game plan, and like Coach Renato talks about this as well, like having the game plan and sticking to that game plan, you know what I mean? Like during the fight camp, and then no matter what you do, like having that decisiveness to be like, we're going 100% all in on this game plan. And I feel like that's what they did, and they come up trumps. But I think one of the comments, you know, he put up on Instagram afterwards, the competitor, was that he was like, you know, if we fought again, I don't believe I could win. You know, like I think he was like, you know, you can beat anybody on the day.
Yeah, it's tactics.
Exactly, it's tactics, and but the fighter has to also believe in the corner. So, you know, you need to believe in what you're putting. It gets difficult if you go out there and maybe the first round doesn't go to plan and then you abandon ship too early. And again, that's one of the things that I've picked up over the years with the Japanese. They're they'll work very, very hard on putting a game plan together and studying the opponent. Obviously, they looked at Cooper with the performance with Ordakov, and they, you know, even Cooper said, like, you know, that fight, he got the win, but if you look at the fight in its totality, there was a lot there that they took away from it.
100%.
You know, and then they made variations where they were like, we're not going to shoot, but we're going to use our strength. And the guy was strong. That was the big thing Cooper said afterwards. He just said it was noticeable. You know, he used that strength, that upper body. He had big delts, like he was a strong guy, and he used it to his advantage. So I think it's just, you know, good to learn like how important strategy can be. And if you're in a fight that maybe you feel, you know, you're up against it, how much more important the strategy is to try and get the W.
Yeah. I love this concept. I stole it from Richie Walsh. Shout out to Richie. But you know, if we talk about you know a pyramid, right? When you're starting in martial arts, it's like the base layer is your technique. How many techniques have you got? You spent all your time should be invested in that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, at the very top of the pyramid would be the tactics.
Yeah.
You know, you spend a very small period on the tactics when you're at the amateur level. But once you start to get, you know, further and further along in your career, you've already got all these techniques.
Yeah.
So then you actually invert the pyramid, and you spend very little time in terms of like, you know, working on your technique because you already have the foundations of all that.
Yeah.
And you spend more time at the top of the pyramid, which is now inverted. So it's actually become the tactics, which end up being the predominant function at the higher levels because A, you've got more tape that you can study on your opponent. B, you've also got a skill set that you already know that your athlete's developed. So now it's like, okay, if you're thinking about like a jigsaw puzzle, what pieces do I need to then take from here and put together with those to make sure that we get the right outcome?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? So, you know, obviously, you know, at the novice or the amateur level, you don't think about that because it's just like, okay, who's better fundamentally?
Yeah.
The person who's typically better fundamentally will probably win that fight.
Yep.
And then, you know, don't get me wrong, there's other things that go into it. There's mindset, there's aggression, there's all these bits and pieces that go into it. But, you know, typically the better fighter at the amateur level will win.
Yeah.
Right?
And another big thing we picked up was as well, there's always these like hidden traps and things you kind of work on. Sometimes you know it and you can see it, but you don't maybe emphasize it or recognize it enough until you have hindsight.
Yep.
So with one championship, the fighters have their appearance fee and then they have the fee if they win. But there's also, if you watch one fighting championship like on a Friday and all that, it's big on the bonus. So the big thing, they're kind of like obviously very, you know, predominant with Muay Thai being based, you know, Asia, Thailand. That's their huge market. So they're constantly looking for damage. They want the knockouts. So if you look at like Cooper's first two performances, like he dominated that first fight, got a submission in round one, and I think it was like, I don't know what it was, 38 seconds, 48 seconds, something like that. No bonus, no fight bonus, which, you know, I personally, I was just like, I don't know, like that was just like,
where's the bonus?
Couldn't do much of a better debut, really. You know, I feel like had he have landed a flying knee and they carried the guy out, I'm almost certain he would have got the bonus. Second fight, you know, he's in all sorts of trouble. Basically, you know, we thought he was gone, and then he pulls out this amazing submission. Amazing submission. You know, inverted armbar, and then, you know, doesn't get the bonus. So one of the things that we kind of, on hindsight, we fell into a bit of a little trap was we went into that fight and Cooper and I, on a personal level, you know, we were discussing about the future and moving forward and what we want to do and yada, yada, yada. And a big thing that he's always wanted to do is experience traveling, going to different fight camps, you know, getting to move around with different people. And it's always been a big dream to go to the US. We've always spoke about that, you know what I mean? Like ever since we met, we're like, go here, go to Japan, go to Thailand, do all this. So going into the fight, once we'd seen the tape on the guy, you know, we were pretty confident. We're like, I can knock this guy out, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, and it is. And the thing is, like, we discussed it, and I actually said, when I first went over with Percy as well, with Coach Renato, Percy was like, I want that bonus. It's like these guys have got no money, you know, they're all young, and because of the nature of MMA, they're training all the time. they're not working full time. They're they're struggling. And Percy was like, I can knock this guy out. I can get this bonus, and it's pretty big money. I think it's about 15,000 US, something like that, maybe 10,000 US. I'm not sure, but it's a good chunk of change. And I said to Percy at the time, I said, don't worry about that. Worry about winning. You got to win. That's the key. But it traps you a little bit, because even with one, the way that the rule set works is that they prioritize damage. So damage is prioritized. They always, and then even when you go to the rules meeting, they're promoting it. They're like, we want to give you the bonus. Chatri we want to get these bonuses out there. So basically what they're saying is,
put on a show, start
we want action.
Yeah,
we want action. So it's very enticing for a guy like Cooper. He's like, I can do this. You know what I mean? I can do it. And then in hindsight, as he said, you learn, you reflect on it. And as he said, when he was on the ground, his head, he was talking to us afterwards, and he's like, all he was thinking was, I want to get up because I want to fight. And he was like, I didn't even attack with jiu-jitsu. I didn't even attack the submissions, and not saying that he could have, not saying that would have been the result, but he's got good jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
He's got good jiu-jitsu. He's very, very good offensive jiu-jitsu, as he's shown. Even in training, a lot of people get surprised by his jiu-jitsu level. He's pretty smart, but the tactic of their team and Cooper just trying to get back up, and he was desperate. He's like, I got to get up because I got to get this bonus, So, and that's where you can fall into a trap where your plan, as we've always said, like you look at someone like Floyd Mayweather, what he was best at was winning. You know what I mean? As we just talked about earlier, Floyd was so effective at even creating the battlefield. Like, I'm going to fight at my venue, my people, my ring, my gloves.
When I turn up.
When I turn up, and you're going to drink the bottled water that we choose. Like, he just basically set everything. It's almost like, when you get to a kid's soccer match and you got, for the first half, we'll go uphill.
The fix is in.
Yeah, exactly.
The fix is in.
They don't cheat. It's not cheating. It's just contrived.
Yeah.
They find a way to put everything in their favor.
Yeah.
And I think that when you go into any fight, whether it be amateur or professional, whether it be maybe you've made it into the UFC or it's just a local event, your objective should be like exactly what you said earlier: create the tactics, create the game plan, and win. You got to win. And I mean, if people say it was a bit boring, or if you don't get the fight bonus, then so be it. But you've got the win and you've moved forward.
See, that's an interesting one, because I feel like currently where the sport is gravitating towards is people want eyeballs, and the best way to get eyeballs is from action.
Exactly,
and that's exactly why one promotes it. And the UFC, they promote it too.
Yeah.
Like you got to, and look, whatever. I don't want to wade into all the extenuating circumstances as to why they might have cut like a guy like Mokaev, right? But the guy was undefeated, right? So if you use that as an example, and just forget about all the things outside of fighting, and just look at it purely from a what's his record, blah 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 blah. You'd think on paper you wouldn't cut somebody like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But sometimes it's like, I think because we're in a sport where it's about eyeballs, and people can actually generate fans from just being an exciting fighter. It takes two to tango.
Yeah, especially
right?
from stoppages. You know what I mean? Like someone, like I said, submissions are cool as well. But definitely there's still that bias to, if I want to talk to you today about a young fighter and I show you something on their Instagram of a knee or a head kick, that's what people are still,
That's the stuff that goes viral.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
unless you're in the jiu-jitsu community and you got like Lucas Kennard submitting Victor Hugo, and then that goes obviously viral. But
yeah.
But
well,
it's
that's where I kind of felt like, even for me, I mean, this is just me talking. I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth or anything. But being over with the One Championship and getting to watch it, like even like Far, she had that amazing last finish. I think round 1 as well.
Yeah.
I kind of feel...
Put her out. Like, the other girl went to sleep.
Out cold, yeah. And I kind of feel like it's a Muay Thai community. They're putting on the 2 MMA fights. I think one of the cards, maybe when Cooper last fought, they put on 1 MMA and then one was the submission grappling bout with the women. I kind of feel like to educate the crowd a little bit more, if someone comes out with a really good submission and they dominate, I don't know, I kind of feel like that should also be rewarded in the fact that it kind of then educates the crowd into like, wow, this is MMA. This is not about kicking and elbowing and kneeing. This has got the whole package. And if someone gets a takedown and manages, like I said, like Far's last win, I just kind of feel like that should be rewarded as well. You know, like it's a dominant. It's the same as a knockout, right? It's like a one hit, one hit of quitter. It's over. Yeah, it's the equivalent. So I'm kind of like, if you're having a mixed martial arts event, but then you don't pay it that same kind of, you don't pay the dues the same. It almost, I don't know, it almost kind of leaves an idea in the spectators' heads like, like they didn't get the bonus because they didn't knock him out. But I'm kind of like, well, it's not Muay Thai. Like it's a different art form. Yeah. So then it's really unusual because there's a lot of the like Uzbekistan and like Russian fighters and so forth that are coming over into the ONE MMA, and they're all very wrestle heavy. So it's kind of conflicting. It's a bit confusing. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's tricky. But look, Cooper, he took the loss, and he wasn't happy to start with, obviously, because it was his first loss as a pro, and he didn't lose many as an amateur really as well. I think more it wasn't the loss; it was more that we were very confident of getting that win. We didn't expect to lose that fight, but no, he's dusted himself back off, and he's now looking forward to just to upskill and move forward. But we just missed our trip to America.
Yeah, fair enough. Can I ask you, obviously, because you're from your personal perspective as a coach, right, and obviously being close to Coops, like I'm curious about your mental space as well, right? Like, so obviously you come in, and as you said, you would have lost a lot of money if you could have bet on that fight, right?
Yeah, definitely.
For you personally, as a coach and a close friend of Coops, like what was your mental ride on that journey? Right?
Yeah, it was hard because, like I said, I met Cooper through a mutual friend, a really good friend of mine, Brant Kogel, who was his initial MMA coach, and that's what I spoke to you last podcast, I'm pretty sure, about. Brant and I go back with our karate journey. So I met Cooper not in kind of a normal kind of like go to the gym, start working with fighters. And I brought Cooper down to Sydney originally, and so he stayed with me. You know what I mean? Like, he stayed with me for a long time, too long probably. But yeah, so you do get very.
Sorry, I want to digress for 1 second. I got to ask you, what did Tanya say when you first brought Cooper over? It was like, what are you doing? Like, are you just bringing kids into our home?
Well, you know what? Like, as again, Tanya's got a kind of. I've always said to Cooper. Tanya's got a similar background. So she's come from that. She's come from struggle, So when I kind of spoke to her originally, I said, we've got this great little kid. And I said, he's had a few, he's had a bit of a rough start, to kind of put it, mildly. She was all about it, really. She's like, okay, as long as he's good, as long as he's a good boy. I said, I think he's a good boy. We'll see how he goes. But no, she's been, without Tanya, it would never have happened, So she's been the main reason that it all kind of happened, so we got my young boy, and so yeah, we've become quite emotionally invested. So it does change it. So when he lost, I felt for him, you know what I mean? Like, I really felt, you feel for all the fighters, you don't want to see anyone lose, but when you have that, I can see the struggle behind the scenes, and I can see how far he's come. Like, Coach Renato and I, like, we both now, like, Coach has invested a lot of time in the Cooper as well, in and behind the scenes. He's doing a lot of work, thing about Coach Renato is what a lot of people, I guess they know, but sometimes maybe need to stop and recognize more, is a coach is acting as a manager, he's acting as an agent, he's acting as a coach, he's acting as a dad. Like, at that kind of
psychologist,
at that grassroots level, when the fighters are coming through, you don't have all that available until the money kind of starts to progress. You know what I mean? So we've both put a lot of work into Cooper, and sometimes, we get together and go, have something that we're, complaining about that he's done or whatever else or something. But we always finish our conversations by going, he's come so far. He's such a good, you got to remember that. It's almost like even when you see a kid at a martial arts school and someone might come in and laugh at them and say, oh, that kid's useless, and you're like, mate, you don't know where he's come from. Like, you don't know how he was the day he walked in, and that's kind of like Coops a fair bit. Like, he's come such a long way, developmentally, and martial arts has always been his forte. That's been there for him, but the rest of the outside scene, and like even when he went over to Abu Dhabi, when Coach Renato was the coach for the IMAF, that was his first trip overseas. Like, he'd never been overseas, and he's on the phone to me like, how do I get a passport? So he's, so when I saw him take the loss, it was hard to watch. Also, he's very clever at finding a way out. He finds a way to win. He's creative under pressure.
Yeah.
And one of his greatest attributes is he's very good in real time.
Yeah.
You know, you see people doing pad work, you see people doing drills, and even in sparring, some people can really excel and do excellent things. But under the lights, you know, when you've got that audience there,
he rises to the occasion.
he rises to it. You know what I mean? He kind of thrives off it. So even with Ordakov, like I remember him going into that last round, and you know, obviously the stress level's high. Like, and Coach Renato's like, you know, you're going to lose this. You're losing this fight. Like, you're going to lose this fight. Like, as he always says, do you want to regret tomorrow? You know, but you look at Cooper, and he's not phased. He's not even in this fight. He wasn't. He manages to keep his cool under fire, which is something, again, another thing that we've been talking about after the fight. Like, maybe he needs to heighten that arousal level a little bit, because you can slip into that level of just being a little bit too calm, a little bit too cool, and then you lose your reaction a little bit. You know, you lose that kind of fight or flight mechanism. You just tend to chill, you know. So, but yeah, no, it was a hard, especially afterwards. We were kind of outside Lumpini, literally like sitting in the gutter, you know, with Coach, and just having that moment. He just had to get out of the stadium and just kind of, what do you do? Like, there's no way.
Let the emotion out.
Yeah, you got to kind of sit down and we're just kind of outside of Lumpini and this, you know, amazing kind of venue. And you do realize, like, even when he was there and we was just basically sitting in the gutter near the car park, even for me, it was really, you know, devastating. But you look around, you've lost, but you know, we're in Thailand, we're in Lumpini. Yeah, the kids come out of Rockhampton. And, you know, in a very short period, he's put together, I think he's had 6 pro fights now. I think he's 5-1. So, and basically he had 1 pro fight, and then it took another year to get the next kind of pro fight because of setbacks, injuries, but mostly people not wanting to fight him. So, yeah, even with the loss, he's like, we're still really proud of him. You know, so.
All right. So then, you know, talk to us about, you know, going over to the UFC in Perth.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I'm still trying to process it myself. Yeah, so obviously I've been doing a lot more down here with Coach Renato and the team, which has been slowly progressing and just getting, you know, better and better and better. I love coming down here and working with FFT, and I love everything about it, and learning, and just trying to improve myself all the time as well. And like I said, working with all the athletes, I learn just as much from them, because there's some high quality people down here, you know, that really is. And Coach Renato and I, we've managed to get some quite good experience together domestically on the nights.
And internationally.
Yeah. That's
going over to one together, you know.
That's been huge, yeah. So first with Percy, and then I think, now 3 times with Cooper. So that's been really cool. And we click, we get along like a house on fire. I think it's a really interesting, I was talking to my wife about it. It's a really interesting dynamic that Coach Renato, obviously, you know, everyone knows how highly decorated and incredible he is as a coach. But I also, like, I don't know how much older I am, 10, 12 years older than him. So, you know, I bring in that little bit of life experience, I guess, you know, so it's a nice little dynamic. As they say, it's always good to have someone you can work with who's 10 years older and someone 10 years younger, because you bring in a different area.
Different voices.
Different understanding. Like, during my 30s, late 30s and into my 40s, there are things that, you know, I've been through and lived that he hasn't, and vice versa. You know, we've both got different experiences, yet we both come from a karate background originally. Yeah. So we get along great. You know, we're very similar in the fact that when we get together, we're just obsessed with learning and training and understanding things. But we work together well on the night. You know, I really listen to him. I kind of follow his lead, and then at the same time, I think that with Coach, I'm not sure. It's just one of those things. Sometimes you work together well with someone, or maybe the personalities don't click. But under pressure, when things are, you know, the heat's kind of on, we both have a way of working well with our own individual kind of aspects with the fighter. And that's going great. So what happened was, I think Coach was over in Thailand with Far, and he messaged me and said, I got some great news, something amazing's come up, but I'll talk to you when I get home. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know what it was really. It could be anything with Coach. He's always got a lot of
million things going on.
He's got things happening all the time. Like, this is a weekly event with him. So he got back and he said, I knew at that point that he was going to Europe. He'd put that together. It was slowly planning and progressing, and more seminars were getting booked and so forth. And then he said, look, I've got this great friend of mine from America, a gentleman called Ricky Glenn, and they met when they were training at Team Alpha Male. I think that's maybe in California. I'm not sure. So that was quite a while ago when Coach was training, living in America and doing all of that. And he said, Ricky's a UFC vet. I think now this was his 11th fight in the UFC. And he said he may be on this card for Perth 305. I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. He said, yeah, but I'm not going to be here. And he goes, oh, I was like, no, that's so sad, and he said, but anyway, I've spoke to them about, you, because we worked together, and I kind of, recommended you if they wanted that extra person. And I honestly, I just thought that's such a lovely gesture. I was really touched, but I thought these guys, I don't know them, never met them. Why would they, have me in the corner type thing? I kind of just thought, I didn't really even think about it, give it a second thought. And then maybe, I think 2 weeks later, we'd had Thailand book and we were doing, everything. And he contacted me, and I think he made a little group message with myself and Ricky. And he said that, the guys want you to be a part of the team, and you're going to go over. You've got your spot for UFC for the corner, which was I was really taken back. It really was quite emotional, and just was like, wow. Because it's always been a dream, you know what I mean? I always, whatever I do in life, I always have a goal to try and just do it the best that I can, see where it leads me. I thought if I work hard, I keep showing up, work hard, show up, listen, learn, keep learning and evolving myself. Let's see where it goes. You never know. And if you meet the right people and you put yourself in the right environment, then you've got a better chance of things happening, I'm always willing to travel. I'm always willing to do my best, whatever environment I'm in. And I just feel like, I've put myself in the right position. And then, of course, having the huge, whether you call it luck or,
I'd say it's a support network, really.
Exactly,
The support of other people, right?
Yeah, and meeting Coach Renato has just been a game changer. Massive game changer. And I've got Tate to thank for that. Tate Quealy, who's, long-term karate friend, student, a guy that we've worked together. I've known Tate since he was 5 or 6 years old. And Tate first met Coach Renato, and then he's like, you got to come and meet this guy. He's incredible. But instantly too, Tate was like, you got to love this guy, So, but yeah, I was really blown away. And then Ricky contacted me, and he's like, look, we'd love to have you. And he goes, if you can come over earlier, you can do the week prep. And I'm all about that. I don't want to just show up and, what am I going to do? Show up to UFC, walk in, sit at the cage, tell everybody, how cool I am. So for me to be able to get there and experience, that's what I'm all about. I want to see everything. I want to see what shoes they wear, what colored drink bottles they have, how they tape their. To me, that's everything. I am just absolutely obsessed with that stuff. How they prepare for it, and especially because Ricky being such a veteran of the game, that was his 33rd pro fight. MMA, and he'd had an additional 17 amateur fights. So that's 50 MMA fights total. He had 2 other cornermen, a guy called Derek Flagg, who was their BJJ kind of specialist, a really great guy and gentleman, and another gentleman called Eric Koch. And Eric is also a seasoned UFC fighter, who obviously hadn't met any of them before. But Eric at one point was ranked number 1 in the UFC to Jose Aldo's title. Things didn't eventuate through injury, and he never got that title shot. But Eric went the distance with Dustin Poirier, fought guys like Clay Guida, and a stack of other top line UFC and MMA fighters. So he was in the corner as well. He was the lead coach. So to basically just to meet them and spend time around them was a dream come true.
From that perspective, right, I guess for people that don't know what the week is like, right, talk us through. So, and I guess to put in some context, right, you were over with Percy and Coops over in Thailand, and then had to fly straight into. Did you fly straight into Perth?
Yeah. So I'd planned to go over and have a family holiday with my wife and my son, which we did, and then I wanted to stay a week with the boys and just be at Bangtao and go to some MMA gyms and just be with the boys like I always am to help them and train, hold pads, and just look after the guys basically. So I had to cut that short, unfortunately, because I was actually really looking forward to that, but I got a better offer.
Sorry, boys.
Sorry, boys. Yeah.
But Percy and Coops, are they still over or they're back now?
I think Percy's just got back maybe yesterday,
Okay.
and Cooper's still there,
Yep.
for a little bit longer. But they were, both the boys were really happy for me. They're like, wow.
Yeah,
like,
what an opportunity.
no one could really believe it, And again, I said to the boys, like, I get over there. They're aware of it as well. They're smart kids. They're like, you can tell they're just like, good, go and learn stuff and give it to us,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I'm there for. But yeah, so I flew from Phuket to Perth, which I think I failed geography twice. So, but it's really close. It's only 6 hours to get across to Perth.
Yep.
So I went over just on my own and went to the official hotel that had for the UFC, which was really cool again, as kind of from a fan's point of view, all the fighters, all the kind of UFC delegates are there. So they kind of take over the whole hotel, they've got their lobby rooms where they've got media and office, and they take the whole thing over. It's so meticulous. And I've got a really good friend of mine, Sam Rutten. He's one of Australia's leading photographers, works for News Corp, but he does a lot for UFC. So he's been involved with the UFC for many years, and he's always told me, he's like, mate, it's like a box. It's like a kit. He goes, they just go from city to city. They've got their staff, and they just unravel the box, set up the cage, and it goes from there. So it's extremely well-oiled machine that they just keep rotating now with very, very finer adjustments. And you could see that when you get to the hotel, it's like the camp, that they set it all up from. Obviously not all the fighters stay there. I think they must have the opposition in a different location. But I know Duplessis and many of the fighters were at that hotel. So yeah, basically I checked in, and then the next day Ricky contacted me and said, we'll meet you, downstairs and that. And it was kind of at that point I was like, oh my goodness, I'm here, on my own. I don't know these guys. So it was quite overwhelming, but when I went down and met the team, could not have met better guys. They were just the most, and it's always kind of typical, the dudes, and the ladies and that are at the top level, that top echelon, they're always very similar. These guys have had decades in the game. They've been involved with UFC, probably lost count, So their ego's not there. They're not threatened by a guy like me. They don't need to prove themselves or act tough or, there's none of that. It's actually the opposite. They were just, as soon as I met them, they were so welcoming. They were so appreciative. They're like, thanks so much for coming. And I'm like, it's all, my pleasure to be here to help you guys. But as soon as we got there, they were like, okay, we're going to meet downstairs and we're going to take you through the whole game plan. And then they went down, because I was obviously watching a lot of footage just so I could, have some input, not just be just a wallpaper sitting there for no reason.
Yep.
And they went through the whole game plan, and then straight away they're just asking me, what do you think? Which is great, you know what I mean? Because as I said to the guys after the fight, I said it was actually really, really hard because you kind of, between a rock and a hard place. Firstly, you don't want to walk there and be like, this is what I think you guys should do. It's ridiculous. So, but on the other side of the coin, you don't want to not offer any of your coaching or expertise. Feedback, because then it's like, well, the guy shouldn't even be here. What's the guy here for? So it's a little bit tricky, but they made that, they took care of all that because they were asking straight away, this is the game plan, anything that you've seen. You know what I mean? And again, too, you learn and learn and learn. Without the ego, these guys, had I have offered back something that was, far-fetched, inexperienced, stupid, I can guarantee you they would have just been like, oh, great, thanks very much, mate. You know what I mean? Probably walked off and had a laugh. There's just no threat. You know what I mean? But on the flip side of the coin, there's nothing to lose. They're like, I wonder whether maybe this guy's seen something. Maybe he's noticed something.
What's the value that you can
absolutely offer? They're open to, as you say, you can learn from anybody, and you never know, sometimes you can be so fixed on your ideas or game plan, and someone throws out, oh, I see that he does this technique, and they're like, whoa, yeah, maybe we've overlooked that, but they were just great. So with the fights coinciding with the US times because of the audience and so forth, I think the first fight was around maybe 7:30 a.m. or 8 a.m. And Ricky Glenn was fight 2. And he fought the Chinese fighter, Kenan Song, who's also a veteran, really, really strong guy. So each morning, the team got up at about, I think the guys were up at about 3:30 in the morning. So they just kept their American time. So they were like, it was funny, like in the evening, because I was just on my own. They're like, okay. I was like, oh, what are you guys doing this afternoon? They're like, oh, we're going to bed. I was like, okay. So they were all in bed at like 7 o'clock and they were getting up at 3.
Yeah.
And then we would meet down in the lobby and then walk up. There was a gym that was not far away, and then just train in the morning and basically, just go through their final, what they'd been doing back in the States, go through a lot of their striking ideas, putting together their wrestling and jiu-jitsu with both Coach Eric and Coach Derek. And then even like I was just there, to be honest, I was just on the mat. I'm always taking photos and videos and trying to, I always like to give that stuff back to the fighters as well. And then same thing, like even in the mornings, watching, learning how they go through their stuff, it was pretty cool. And then, Coach Eric would just be like, he'd just turn around and be like, Coach Ray, give us your feedback. What do you think? And yeah, there were little things that I thought, things that I was actually watching, little things that I saw in the training sessions. Some of the things were just basically like what I always am working on with movement, weight distribution, getting his weight back out after he'd fired his shots, because this guy was very, very heavy-handed, especially with his left hook. But, it's just those little tiny things. You don't want to be throwing out things like a kick like this. It's just ridiculous, especially at that point in the game.
That's right. You're not going to change anything dramatic from a technique perspective.
Not at all.
No,
not at all. And especially a guy who's a seasoned vet. He's 35 years of age. You know what I mean? The way that they do things now is the way that they do things.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I was learning a lot more. And just they were very calm, very, very calm, very like going through that process. They've done it over and over and over. And yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch, and even Coach Eric, you could kind of tell, like, as we got closer and closer to fight day, he was getting more and more toey. It was almost like
he was going through the.
Well, he's still young.
Well,
he's still young himself, so he's still in his 30s. I think he's kind of said he's, somewhat retired. He might have a bit more left in the tank, but you could tell he was getting on edge. He looked like it looked like he was ready to jump in and fight as well. So, but between them and the other guy, Coach Derek, he was very calm dude, really cool. And I just love that kind of approach. Kind of reminds me of my younger days with Johnny Lewis. Johnny was always just so calm, almost a little bit too calm, and just he would just see what he saw and just be like, I remember he'd always be like, okay, son, like, watch out there. They're trying to come up with that uppercut. So, and I think when you're in that type of pressure, you need someone who's got that real calm way to give you that precise information and just leave it where it is. Like, that's it. You already know what to do, but maybe there's been something you're a little bit complacent with. And they were great coaches. Like, they were both of them, did a really, really good job, with Ricky.
So then, what was it like to be cage side for you in that environment, right?
Yeah, it was really cool. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, first of all, going to the UFC, your mind's kind of like as a fan. You know what I mean? Like, I've only been to the UFC, I think, twice in my life as a spectator. And I was in the nosebleed seats, and me not seeing too well. I was more just there to listen to the music.
Can you see the screens?
Yeah, I can see the screens. The screens help a lot, actually.
Okay.
So,
yep.
I think I went back in, might have been like 2012 or 2010 or something when they first brought the flyweights in.
Yep.
And then I went to the Adesanya fight in Sydney when he lost. When was that? Last year. I think I went with Cooper and the guys. So yeah, you're there as like a fan. You're kind of like overwhelmed. But to be honest, like, and not just to sound good either, I really do get very concerned about the fighters. Yeah. So it doesn't. If I'm down on like the lowest level amateur night, or where on an eternal card or whatever it is, and I think again a lot of that really does go back to Johnny Lewis. Like a lot of Johnny Lewis's ways rubbed off on me because I just had such a high opinion of him, looked up to him. He was one of my real first kind of role models as a coach, but he was always there for the fighter. That was it. Like, you know, as much as like he had, you know, Jeff Fennick, Kostya, like, you know, Gary St. Clair, and the list goes on. He was never overwhelmed by the world titles and the fame and all that stuff. You could tell Johnny was genuinely there for the health and the safety and the well-being and the nurturing of the fighters. So I have that in me. When I get there, I'm like, oh, this is so cool, the UFC. But instantly I was like, I wanted to help look after Ricky. You know, I just wanted to make sure that him and the guys were comfortable. What could I do to be there for them? And in the back of my mind, you get to meet them. I don't know these guys, but straight away, you know, he's got a 3-year-old son. You know, he's a really nice guy. So straight away, I'm like, I don't want this guy to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to be a fan and, you know, cheer at the UFC. I want to make sure that this guy can, and I'm a part of this. So what tiny little thing can I do that may help, you know, like anything at all. So I really wanted to play that role. But being in it on a personal level was amazing. Like, I brought my jacket today. This is the fight day, part of the fight day kit.
The walkout kit?
Yeah, walkout kit, which has got Ricky's name, Glenn on the back and everything.
Yep.
Actually, I wore this today because it's pretty cool, but I'm going to give it to Coach Renato. So I'm going to give him the fight kit because he was meant to be there and it's his friend. So I want to give him the kit and the shirt and everything because I know that'll mean a lot to him. And Ricky's now retired, so that was his last fight.
Yeah, you put a post up about that.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yep. So he basically didn't really tell anybody. It was kind of sad. It was a bit heartbreaking, really. He's a very calm, kind of quiet guy. Again, not that I know him. I've only just had that moment to meet him, but fighting is such an intimate thing.
Yeah.
Like, and it's a very, you really, if you're going to meet someone for the first time, I've met these guys and it's like 3 or 4 days leading into, you know, what would be his last fight on his contract with the UFC. And then, you know, you're going into something that potentially you can go in there one man and come out a different person. So although I don't know him, it's very different to meeting someone in normal circumstances, you know. And it's just a beautiful guy, really, really nice, a gentleman, a real warrior. And behind the scenes, all the staff that were working, they knew him, you know, like he's been around for so long. And when he'd finished, you know, he had to get stitched up under both eyes. He had a huge hematoma where he got hit. And he never complained. He never said a word, went in, got stitched up. The only thing he said was sorry to the coaches because he really wanted to get the win for the coaches and for his last fight, which is, you know, a very selfless kind of way of thinking. But some of the staff, I can't remember who it was, there was like, I didn't hear it entirely, but I heard Eric talking about it with him as well, Coach Eric, and they were like, you should have, what happened? Like, how come you didn't get the microphone to speak? And, you know, they put their gloves to rest in the middle of the octagon. And Ricky just said, yeah, he goes, now, he was all stitched up and battered, and he goes, yeah, I kind of wish I did now. He goes, but I didn't notify the UFC to tell them because I just didn't want to make a fuss, you know. And I was just like, oh man, like, just some people are that way, you know. Like, he's just that kind of guy. Like, he's there for he's just a genuine article, you know what I mean? Like, a real nonchalant, you know, down to earth kind of guy, a real warrior, you know, real samurai mentality. And you know, it was interesting. One of the things that I spoke to a lot of people was after the fight. You know, you get to hear a lot of their story behind the scenes and what they've been through, the injuries. Like, 35's not old, but it's not young in that game.
Yeah.
As they say in MMA, it is a young person's game. You know, it's just tricky when you're getting older. And he's got a young boy now, and he's about to open up his own BJJ school in Iowa. So he's, you know, life starts to change gears. Yeah. But the injuries were a big issue, and he spoke to me about a few of them and so forth. And you know, after the fight, you know, you go on and you read. There was quite a few comments, and people had written some. You know, as they always do, they just write things that are pretty hurtful. You know, pretty cold kind of comments about Ricky. And I just thought, man, like, how can you? I don't know, like, how can you even write something about a guy that's you don't know a guy that's had 11 UFC fights. You turn up once in the UFC anyone that trains at a gym, and if someone goes, oh, who's that guy? And they're like, oh, that's, so-and-so. Yeah, he fought in the UFC. Like, whether he won or lost, like, to get to that level alone, speaks volumes about somebody. But this guy's fought there 11 times. And, yeah, maybe from an outsider view, you might be like, oh, the performance didn't look like up to what you're normally, used to seeing if you're watching highlights of, the top, 2-3 people. But they just don't realise, what these warriors kind of go through. Anyway, after the fight, he was pretty quiet. He said, "No, I'm okay. I'm all good." But the swelling was really bad. So when he got home, I obviously have followed up, quite a bit. I just wanted to check in on him, make sure he's okay. And no one would know this at all. And he sent me a photo. He said, "Yeah, Ray, thanks for messaging. I'm okay." And he sent me a photo of his leg up and his knee all jacked up. And, bandage. I was like, what's that? What's going on? He goes, "I just had surgery yesterday on my knee." And I said, "Oh, like, what happened to your knee?" And he goes, "No, I didn't tell anyone." He goes, "But I stuffed it in the training camp." He goes, "I just blew it apart." And I went to the surgeon, went to the doctor, and they said, it's stuffed. You're going to need surgery. And he goes, "Well, I got a fight booked for Perth. So book me in. When I get home, I'll get it done." So he was on one leg. He was literally on one leg. And I noticed in training, like, he'd mentioned that his knee, he said one day, "My knee's a bit stiff." It's almost like they were saying the other day about Dan Hooker, like, that's just a scratch.
That's right.
Same thing. Like, but he literally fought, if you go back and watch that fight now, he fought that fight on one leg.
Yep.
He fought on one leg, and like there was one point where he was in a bit of trouble and I was watching it from the cage side. I thought, oh, I hope he doesn't get stopped here. He was in a bit of a spin, and he got out of it and he just rallied back. Like, he fought the whole way. Like, even round 3, he was trying to get that win. And Kenan Song's really dangerous. He's notorious for knocking people out. He's just so heavy-handed. So you got a guy who's on one leg, who's coming a weight class up, and has come off a couple of hard losses, and then your last fight, you're on one leg and you're facing a guy like Kenan Song. It's crazy. Like, it's absolutely, and then people write disrespectful comments. It's just like, that's why I made a little thing where I messaged the team at FFT and I just said, do not read comments and that, because people just are clueless. Like, they just haven't got they don't, and how can they know? They don't know. But if you don't know, you probably shouldn't say stuff like that, Yeah.
How crazy. That mentality, though, to be so tough mentally. Yeah. To just go in there and still try and put on a show despite all of that. Like, it just goes to show like how different combat athletes are.
Oh, they're cut from a different cloth.
Yeah.
And that was the coolest thing, to be around him, to see how he handled himself, his respect level to everybody, his respect to his opponent. Just an amazing. I'm just so happy, thanks to Coach Renato, I got to meet these guys, and I hope that I've kept in touch with all of them, and I hope that I can keep that relationship up. And all the guys, like, typically they're like, come to America, you got to come and check out Iowa, and come to the gym. Coach Eric runs MMA gym called Revolution, which was really funny too, because his business partner that runs the gym with him, that gentleman teaches karate. So they've got a big karate school with all the kids, and then they kind of slowly transition it into MMA.
Yep.
And Coach Eric is the head MMA coach. So they've got a really good gym, cooking over in Iowa. And he said he's got some pretty, red hot young prospects coming through. So amazing for me to meet these people.
It's I think that that we'll definitely see a lot more of that in the future, where like your traditional martial arts schools at the younger level will still be very traditional.
Yeah.
Like a karate school is still a karate school at the kids level.
Yeah.
But then providing those kids with an opportunity to progress into mixed martial arts and
definitely.
those sorts of things is probably the future.
Yeah.
And like we see that whether it's like Van Roon's over in New Zealand, obviously Carl Van Roon, immense taekwondo background, traditional from that perspective. But you watch some of his pad work with the guys where it's like they're doing like MMA striking, but adding in the hook kicks, adding the spin kicks, like he's
integrating it.
He's integrating it.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's going to create different looks.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
if you don't have the experience of fighting against somebody with that particular skill set, like it's you're in for a rough time.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Like, it's really the idea of it. And speaking to Coach Renato, like, constantly, like, we're always going back and forth about it all. There's a couple of ways of looking at it. So it may evolve to some point to where you've got MMA gyms where the kids are learning MMA, and I think that has its benefit as well. But I think then you're going to be at a risk of kind of like almost like the old days when you'd go into a weights fitness gym. And in the old days, like I remember when I was doing a training course at TAFE, and one of the teachers there, he was talking about in the old days, like back in the 70s, you'd go into a gym and there'd be like a blue form for the men, and that'd be the program. You know what I mean? Bench press, bicep curls. And there was a pink form for the women, you know, to do this, whatever training, which is just kind of so old-fashioned and kind of narrow-minded. I think the issue is that you may go into an area where the MMA, if you go into like a one MMA template, people are going to be teaching pretty much the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be this one kind of template. When you still have coaches that are coming from, you know, jiu-jitsu, now they're doing things like a lot of no-gi judo. You got your wrestling specialists. You got people coming from taekwondo, karate. They're going to bring in those kind of special effects. So you definitely don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose it to where you've got like, I think MMA is kind of becoming its own. Originally, it was mixed martial arts. Now MMA is almost becoming its own
discipline.
It's becoming its own discipline, which I think definitely has advantages because you get the well-roundedness from an early stage. But you've only got so much time on your hands, and without having a specialty coach come from an area, you probably will lose a little bit as well, you know?
It's funny, when you think about the genesis of MMA, right? Like it was all about contrasting styles, right?
Yep.
Now I feel like the sport's developed where we're not necessarily contrasting styles per se, but we're contrasting ideas, right? Because there's I would almost say like a very specific language or flavor to certain styles, but when you break it down, like, you know, whether if it's a striking martial art, like a lot of the principles obviously cross over. So now what we're contrasting is, you know, what are the different tactics and what are the different ideas to get the outcome that you want.
Yes, yeah, right? Exactly.
And I think that's the next sort of evolution, because like I think, you know, if you sort of think about the breadth of mixed martial arts, there's so much to learn that you could, you know, maybe have a basic understanding of a lot of different skills, and maybe you can find the right skill set to win.
Yep.
But then when you go down that single discipline focus, then you're going to get the technical depth that you need.
Yep.
As an example, if you physically can't take the fight to the floor and that's where you're strong, well, no matter how many tools you got, if you can't take the fight to the floor, it's going to come down to, is you're striking better than the other person.
Definitely. Yeah. I think another factor as well is, as much as you try and create the ultimate formula and the ultimate recipe, body type comes down to a big factor as well.
Yeah.
So you got body type, then you got to try and change your game around maybe injuries. And then also as well, the other factor is like just even little simple things like, again, body type relates to stance. And a lot of the different styles, like sometimes people, like when you look at martial arts as well, if you travel and you study it a lot, you see it clearly. Like the taekwondo guys, they're very lean, you know, they're very sinewy. You know, the judo guys are built like fridges. Like, so people start to, it's not like, oh, judo's better or BJJ's better. You will generally, you know, start to gravitate towards your body type because you're going to be good at it. You know what I mean? So some people just can't kick. It's just the way it is. And like with kicking, sometimes people, like coaches, can kind of humiliate or kind of, you know, make fun of people. But a lot of it, again, is like the hips, the way the hips
structure.
There's the structure. And then a lot of people go, you need to stretch more. But people who stretch a lot are people who have flexibility. They have range of motion. So they enjoy stretching because they were flexible pretty much from day one. People who are so tight in that hip joint, they hate it. They can't kick above their waist. Like they can barely body kick, you know? So, and then you're like, stretch more, but the stretching will help, but it's always going to be limited. So, and then again, because you're restricted by time with training, you got to be careful with how much time you invest into one area.
Yeah, it might still be a weakness.
100%. And yeah, exactly. So you've invested all this time in kicking, and then, as they say, you've got junk or rubbish, and then after all this work, you've got modified rubbish. It's still rubbish. It's modified. It's better, but it's not going to be able to be effective in a fight. So I think that's where you need the diversity of that mixed martial arts, because some people are just fast. Some people are, if you're so strong, you're always going to be more inclined to go to wrestling and things like this, you know.
It's funny, I did a podcast last week with Jakub Kachanak. He's one of the wrestling coaches for grappling education and also teaches out at Origin, but he was top 8 at one point in the world, and he was talking about how if you look at his body structure, he's not a typical wrestler build.
Yep.
He's tall, his arms are long, like he's very lanky for a wrestler.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, that Slovakian, that Russian style of wrestling. And he only started to find success when he had a coach who started sort of providing with different ideas that related more specifically to his body type.
His type, yeah.
Because
exactly.
when he was young, he was saying like a lot of the coaches, they sort of just look at it, no, he's not a wrestler.
Yeah.
Just because of his body structure.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, he's learning the same fundamental techniques as everybody else. But when he started to find success was like being able to use the right techniques for his body type.
Yeah, exactly.
Because with long arms, you can go for the ankle pick. You can do certain things that the guys who had the more traditional wrestling body of being like, shorter, stockier, stronger, that they couldn't do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, that's why the game's so beautiful. And even from like a coaching point of view, that's why it's so good to find the right coach and the right team partners. Like I was speaking to some of the fighters here at FFT, and like there's some really strong female fighters here. And again, I think that the same thing, like having down the track more female coaches, because again, like you can relate little things better, you can understand things a little bit differently. I'm not saying that females can't coach males or vice versa. I think obviously they can, it's already been done. But to bring for a high level, an elite level female fighter, if you can bring a female coach on board for certain things, it changes the psychology of it. And again, even with body type as well, it's difficult if you've got a coach who's, 6'4" and they're heavyweight and they're coaching a flyweight, perhaps it's difficult. Do you know what I mean? Like it's tricky to kind of like, they can't understand that. Not to say it can't be done, but definitely when you've got someone relatable to your style or someone who's clever enough to do that, it can be a big advantage. It can really help you a lot. So, but again, that's MMA. It's so diverse. You can find these coaches. You can find the right people for the right fit. It's really cool.
Yeah. Let's. I want to talk about obviously heading over to Thailand and what was your experience like training over at Bang Tao with the boys and
it
all
was
that kind of stuff?
A little bit limited because, like I said, because I got cut short going to Perth, so I missed out on a fair bit of it, but I squeezed in a little bit. A big part of it was I wanted my son to experience Thailand, being like a third world country, seeing how the other half live and seeing how the kids train and so forth. So I got to Muay Thai gym with Cooper and Percy on one day before we left, but I took my son to Bang Tao, and he got like a one-on-one Muay Thai session with one of the older coaches, which was incredible. 1 hour, he had about 3 water breaks, didn't use a timer. My son was like, tearing up and very emotional, but he got through it. And look, the coach was really hard on him, but he found my son's limit, took him to that limit and didn't go too much past it. He was a really good coach, but pretty firm with hitting with the pads, and it was a great experience for him. And then we were in Thailand, and my wife and I were in a taxi, and my son fell asleep, and we met this really cool guy, a guy called Yas, and he was born and bred in Phuket, fought Muay Thai as a kid, and he says to me in the taxi, you should take your son to my friend's gym, this Revolution Muay Thai. He goes, he runs it, and there's some really good kids there. Maybe your son can have a move around with him. I was like, that would be crazy, because I really wanted him to see, Thai kids training. Yeah. So I told my son when we're back at the hotel, and he just burst into tears. Like he just dropped his bundle. He's like, I can't do this. I can't spar with these kids. And because my son's always around fighters at our house, he's always around it. He's acutely aware of MMA and Muay Thai, sees a lot on TV. He understands the level of it, and it's pretty scary, right? Yeah. And my son's, he's been training since he was 2 or 3. He lives in the gym, but he's a very gentle soul. He's a very calm kid. And Cooper always jokes. Cooper says that Sid's going to grow up and be a priest, not a fighter. So he reckons Sid's got a priest mentality more than and he's very funny. But so he was really upset. I said, look, buddy, I'm not going to make you spar. I said, but in Thailand, it's probably the best place. They're going to look after you. They're not going to, hurt you or anything. And I said, look, I'm not going to make you spar. And he gave me a big hug, and he was so upset. So anyway, we went to this gym, and it was so hot. It was just like the humidity is crazy. You can't breathe properly, And he jumped in the class, and it was really old school. It was pretty much as traditional as you could get, which is exactly what I wanted. And my wife and I just watched. So we got to put him in the class. Adults, there were fighters, there were tourists. There were Thai kids training. And he was crying, he was running, they do bag work. The head coach was a really nice guy. He had to sit on the pads, just did one-on-one work with him during the class. They're doing push-ups in between rounds. Like, he got obliterated. And he was calling my son Sydney from Sydney. He goes, Sydney from Sydney, come on, keep going. And it was funny to see him get through this emotional threshold. He hit it and he got through it and passed it, which is exactly what I wanted. It's just so great for kids to do and to feel that. And that's what I got at the same age when I was in Japan, putting in 6 hours a day. This training, the Muay Thai, was harder than what I did in Japan, but he did 1 hour. I was doing 6, and I was doing it day to day to day to day. So it was a different poison. But then at the end of the training, towards the end of the training, they do clinch work, and they do sparring. So he said to my son, Sydney from Sydney, come on, spar. And there's a boy there, and you can see my son was just like, oh my God. Like, what am I going to do? There's nowhere to run. Looked over at, my wife and I, but we're like, well, buddy, you're in the class. Like, you're with the coach now. So he started sparring very lightly with a 12-year-old boy. And the boy was like a miniature adult. He was incredible. In his defense, his understanding of the game, and he could work with my son and maneuver him and basically toy and play with him. And there was a younger coach that was assisting them, and my son got a good black eye because he walked into a punch.
Oh no!
Got knocked down a couple of times, but he was good, and the boy was looking after him, but he was very like no emotion. Like, my son was kind of smiling and trying to I think my son was almost like, come on, we're buddies. You know what I mean? Like, don't kill me. And the kid was amazing. It was such you just can't get this experience, especially in Australia. And then afterwards, we learnt that the boy had 60 Muay Thai fights, 12 years of age, and they said he seldom loses, and he's the breadwinner for the family, And it was great for me to talk to my son afterwards and just say, look, you got to understand that, we're trying to push you out of your comfort zone here in Australia. But really, the levels go up. It gets harder and harder and harder. And I said, like, that boy's 2 years older than you. He's training like that pretty much daily. And I said, he's had 60 full contact Muay Thai fights, and trying
crazy,
to,
right? It's
crazy. And trying to explain to the kids, and the boy it was incredible. It's just like, whether you approve of it or whether you don't approve of it, it doesn't matter to them. They're living that life. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to witness it and experience it and appreciate it and have respect for their culture and what they do and what they go through. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. It's not relevant, especially to them. And I think my son really took a lot away from that, And I've actually got a really good friend of mine, Richard Hesselton Sensei. He's a coach at Takushoku University in Tokyo. And one of the big things that he's taught me over many years, we're in contact weekly. He's an amazing karate guy and coach, and he often injects into our conversations. He's always like, you need to coach and you need to yourself be more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. He's like, whatever you do, you've got to be more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the other big thing that he constantly teaches me is, he said, you need to be within an environment that you can't control. Once you're in an environment that you can control, you can call the shots, you can quit when you want to, you can tap out whenever you feel like it, you can walk off the mat and have a drink, you can say, I got bruised, I'm going to have a week off training. When you're in an environment that you're controlling, you're not a student, you're not really training. You need to be in an environment that you put that trust in the coaches and your training partners, and it's going to be hard, it's going to push you past your limits. There are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days, and that's what I really wanted to find, that experience for my son. I wanted him to be put into an environment that he couldn't control, and he got that little experience in Thailand, and I wanted him to learn to be more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I feel like, not to kind of beat it up a fair bit, but I feel like the kids at the moment, especially the teenagers, they're struggling with that a lot. Like they're too comfortable. They're just literally too comfortable, and they've got an excuse for everything. They've got a way out of everything. And unfortunately, again, not all of them. I don't want to be disrespectful or rude, but I feel like a lot of parents are the the problem behind that.
They're
Because
facilitating that.
they're facilitating it, you know what I mean? And like when you get to Thailand and you see how they're training and what they do, you realize that the level is up here of what they're going through physically and emotionally, and what we're putting the kids through, it's already so watered down. Like even with my own school, like recently, I've had a few difficulties with certain students and things of that nature, you know, where discipline and respect, it's really struggled. And you question yourself all the time. I'm like, gee, maybe I'm too hard. Maybe I'm just not listening to them. Maybe I need to cater for them a little bit more. And then I go home and I reevaluate myself. I think about what I've learnt and what martial arts means to me. I'm like, no, this is crazy. This is ridiculous. Like we're trying to water down what's already been watered down.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem, is that when you water things down, the next generation, they don't know that. They don't know that's been watered down. They don't know that, like a mum and a dad, they don't understand that, you know, a child or a teenager just walks onto the mat with their shoes on and they get in trouble, they get disciplined for it. They're kind of like, that's so rude. Like, how dare you disrespect my child? And like, well, how are they meant to learn? You know what I mean? How are they meant to learn? And if they didn't know and they didn't get the memo, well, now you know. That's how you learn, you know. And a lot of that is escaping martial arts. And that's where I feel like it's so vital to keep that intact, because if that gets lost, it's no longer martial arts. It's just a sport. It's just something else, you know. It's just something you're trying to create, another thing you're trying to create revenue from.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because like tradition is one of those things that often gets not necessarily a bad rap, but it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, it's outdated.
Definitely.
Right? But you do, you know, and I've always said this, you know, like to learn anything, you need structure.
Yep.
And, you know, apologies for people that have heard me say this a million times, but I just, you know, I was thinking about it. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about factory farming, and you'll see where I'm going with this analogy in a moment, right? Because, you know, when you think about, you know, most people would often think about, you know, when you think about factory farming, you think about the worst case scenario. You think about like this chicken coop with 1 million chickens stuffed in it and they're all just popping out eggs kind of a thing. But it's like, okay, at what point, you know, does the cage not become a cage for a chicken? You know, like there's one chicken and the cage is the size of a house. It's not really a cage, is it? Right? But there's still structure.
Yeah.
There's still something there.
Yeah.
It only becomes an issue where you've now jammed 1,000 hens into that house.
Yeah.
And then they can't move. So that sort of, you know, actually applies to almost anything we do, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you think about it from that perspective, it's like if you want to think about, you know, the lives of chickens and being restricted when they're jammed in a cage. Look at people living in apartments.
100%. Yeah.
It's no different.
Yep, definitely.
Right?
Well, look at lockdowns with COVID. Like, you know, the ability to cope under pressure. And like, as one of the quotes I read, like, they were like, oh, we're all in the same boat. And someone said, no, we're all in the same ocean, but we're in very different boats.
Yeah.
And some people really suffered during that time, you know, like, and I think that martial arts, it needs to keep that mentality of not suffering, but at times suffering. At times there has to be that struggle. That's what you want to bring your kids to. You want to bring your kids into a synthetic environment of struggle, of hardship, you know what I mean?
Discipline.
And now sometimes there's always going to be coaches that take advantage of that. Some coaches are just there for the punishment. They're just there to be cruel or mistreat students or mistreat fighters or people. And that's where you change gyms. That's where you go, this culture is not for me. But I feel like if you start catering for the student, if you start catering for the kids and the family, you know, you go back to that whole McDojo type mentality, you know, like, but that's the big thing that, my friend really instilled into me. And especially he's been in Japan training, competing and living for the past, I think like 25 years or something crazy like that. And, you know, when you go to Japan, when you step out of your bubble in Australia or wherever you might be, you no longer you don't have that luxury. Like you go to Thailand and you jump into their gym, their rules, like you want to fight over there, you want to be in their environment, you got to step up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even then, you have to understand that for foreigners, because you're paying and you're such an important part to them from a, you know, tourism, you know, economical point of view, they're still looking after you.
Yeah.
They're still looking after you. Like my son got looked after. It was probably the hardest training of his life, and he still got looked after. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't getting the treatment like if I was to bring him to the gym as a Thai young Thai boy and what they would probably go through.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
so I think we just need to make sure that we keep those values instilled, and that was a big part. I think even for Percy and Cooper, they really wanted to. Cooper talks about it a lot as well. He wants to be on the floor where no one knows him and no one cares about him.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's a great thing. Like even with Percy, I was chatting to Percy. He did a training at I think the same gym that I took my son to, and he just said to me, "Man, that was hard." He's like, they don't know him. They don't know who he is.
They don't care.
They don't care. They don't even. Most of them don't even really like MMA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like, "Oh, you train Muay Thai, fight Muay Thai," and they're like, "Oh, no, I do MMA," and they're just like, like.
Yeah.
So,
Let's see where your striking's at.
Yeah, let's see how you go. And Percy, contacted me. He's like, "Man, that was hard." Like he goes, "You don't understand. That was really hard," and that's great. You need to find those challenges, to where you can be put, like I said, into an environment that you can't control.
Yeah.
When you're in that environment, you can't. And I think again, Coach Renato does that a lot here quite well. When you're on the mat with Coach, you're in his little world for that time period, and I love, because he brings, even though Coach is still quite young, like I think he's only in his early 30s, he has a bit of an old school way, probably mostly from his father, I'd say.
Yeah.
But he brings a lot of that old school way, to the table, which I think is great, especially for the younger MMA fighters here.
Yeah. Well, that's the key benefit of cross training, right? When you go visit somewhere else and you're in a different room.
Yep.
You're also developing your own ability to read the room.
Yeah.
On a personal level, like at a personal development level, not talking about martial arts development.
Yep.
You have to deal with different personalities.
Yeah, definitely.
You're getting to see different styles.
Yep.
Because, even though at an individual level, everybody's style is going to be tailored to their body type
Exactly.
and what they prefer.
Yep.
What's being taught in that room is also, it flows through
Yep.
to, the style of the people that are in that room.
Yep.
So when you go to a Thai gym, well, you're going to expect to see a Thai style, but even within Muay Thai, there's different styles.
Exactly.
There are guys that are hand heavy. There are guys that are knee heavy. There are
Yep.
guys that are elbow heavy, clinch
Yep.
heavy. There's all of these different styles
Yep.
that every gym has a different flavor to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like, everyone needs to always, it's good to be reminded of like the core values. Like every time you go to the gym, like try to remind yourself of why you started and what your original goal was. Like I said, like at the moment now, like, oh, wow, I got to go to the UFC and be in the corner. But like, to me, like, I said, even wearing the jacket today, like I never wear UFC gear. You know what I mean? Like I'm not walking around like I did this. It's all just another opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
I don't wear UFC gear. I don't want anyone to try and fight me. I'm too old for that shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I think it's very easy to lose track. Very, very easy. And we all do it at times, but when you go to a particular coach, a particular sensei, whatever you want to call it, a teacher, part of it can be culture. And some of those cultures come from different parts of the world, and you're bringing that culture into a gym, maybe within Australia, but from somewhere else. Like karate is a good example with Japan. But also you're there to learn. Like people forget that. Like when you go there, you're there to learn from that coach, and you're not going to agree with all of it. You're not going to agree with all of their ways or all of their ideas, but you have to understand that that's probably what they've been through. They've been through that channel. That's how they've developed, and you're there to take a grasp of it and understand. And like recently, I had a mother of a student that trained with me, and there was a little bit of a problem with the kid with discipline and so forth. And she said to me, "They're not you, but they're not you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know they're not me. Like that's why you've brought them here. You've brought them here to like."
Develop.
We train really hard, and we, like, if I'm here and Coach Renato says to me, honestly, if I'm here and Coach Renato said to me almost anything within reason, if he said to me, "Can you pack the chairs away? Can you move? Can you do this? I'm going to do it straight away. I'm not even questioning him. Like, it's not even a problem. Like, maybe if he said it in a rude way, I'd be like, oh, maybe I've upset him or something's wrong. But anything that he asked me to do, I'm going to do it instantly. He's the coach. He's the boss. Maybe he just needs that stuff out of the road quickly because there's another class coming on. Yeah. And I'm just the man that's available there. Like, I don't think I'm anything from anywhere, And the other thing that when we were discussing that the mother said to me was, I'm teaching my children to learn how to say no. And I was like, okay, well, that's great, but do that somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't walk in here to this gym with Coach Renato or any of the coaches here, and I'm, practicing my rights on how to say no.
Yeah.
Then go home.
How are you going to learn how to?
How are you going to go home?
It's like we're doing this technique. Oh, but I want to do this technique.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anything. Again, always within reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Always within reason. We're not in Thailand. We're not in Japan. We're not in Russia, right? We're in a different environment. We're not in China. We're in a different culture, right? So we have our culture and our level of expectations of, you know, what is acceptable with kids and students and what's not acceptable. But we need to be like, you know, you're with that coach and that's the teacher, you know, and that even in Muay Thai, one of the big teachings, you know, with the tradition before the start of the fights and so forth is to pay homage and respect to their coach. That's what it's all about. Not that I know a lot about it, but from what I've read and heard, you know, like it's constantly to give appreciation and respect back to their coach and their gym that's got them to that level, you know, and I think that's why my father pushed me and my younger brother to get that. Where are you going to learn that stuff? Well, you learn it at home, but home's difficult because in the home environment, mum and dad are covering a lot of areas.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard for mums and dads to cover everything, but especially for girls as well, but especially for young boys to go in there and have a coach like someone like Renato. You know, you got to, shape up or ship out, you know, and I think that is something that we really don't want to lose within martial arts, whether it be MMA or whether it be something more traditional like karate or jiu-jitsu. You want to keep that intact.
You're still doing things with schools?
Yeah, every week we still have our program with Pennant Hills High School. So that's our MMA program that we run. That's going along really nicely. We get a few kids transfer into my program, but a lot of those kids that we're getting, it's not a grade sport, so more of the athletic kids are doing grade sport, so we get a lot of the drifters, and they're doing really well with it. But it takes a bit of a nudge to get them to progress to the next step, but some of them are. We've got a few boys. We've got one young student now. He's doing really well in our program, so I want to start bringing him down here to Rockdale.
Wow, okay.
So yeah, that's going really
nice
well.
Nice little feeder.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great now for my little local scene. It's not a real area of fighting, to be honest. It's more of a footy, cricket, soccer, netball area. But it's great now for the ones that do show a bit of promise and they're interested. I can bring them down here to Rockdale and give them some exposure to, you know, a much bigger pond.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Any other stories you want to share before we wrap up?
No, like it's just been, it's been great. We've got so much to look forward to in the future. I think the next year it's just going to be bigger. Like with Coach Renato just coming back from Europe, I'm sure he's going to have, 101 different stories as well. And it's just growing all the time. The team here at FFT, they're bringing in so many international fighters now. It's just amazing being here and, doing a lot more one-on-one work with the fighters, which has been great. I feel like I'm upskilling. I got a long way to go. I'm really keen to see where I can get to in the next 5 or 10 years. I feel like in another 5 to 10 year period, I can really put something together very special. Just got to try and, hang off the coattails of these great coaches and these great young fighters as well. The fighters are great. Like these young ones, they're learning at such a rapid rate that, I pick up just as much from being around them. And I'm loving it down here. And I hope that I can just help, to keep value adding to the team the best that I can. I know this experience with the UFC probably more than anything is just that exposure. Being around it, understanding how organised it is and that demand of professionalism. You could tell at the UFC, every person there, including the coaches, all of the wannabes have been cut and left all a long way behind. You could feel in the air, everyone there was top shelf. Even to the media, it's top shelf media, top shelf photography, top shelf doctors and medical staff. Behind the scenes, we always had a person next to us. There was basically a person that was there to run for you anytime you needed something.
Wow.
So if Ricky was like, I think he needed like an ankle brace or something, then it was the wrong size. There was like a lady or a man there to basically just standing there for you, at your any
beck and call.
Yeah, that's definitely like one was really high level, an amazing promotion. But I felt that UFC was that level kind of up or two. It was incredible. And Coach Renato said that to me. He's like, wait till you get there and you can feel it and smell it and taste it, So, yeah, I really hope I can bring that back to the team, even just the sheer motivation. But, just onwards and upwards. And, I can't wait for the next 12 months and see how the team keeps progressing.
All right, cool. If people want to find you, how do they find you, Ray?
Just on my Instagram is probably best. Yeah, just Ray Morcomb on my Instagram. And I'm always around here at the gym, Rockdale, hanging out with guys like you. So, it's really cool. And you're another, integral part of this. Like even the other day, just on Sunday, I was listening and, watching you coach and help run the team through sparring. And, you're another highly valuable part of this team. So it's really cool. And I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Thanks, Ray. No, you're more than welcome, and you're welcome anytime. So it's been great to get some of these stories out of you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I love getting the updates, and it's always I always think it's cool to see like when we do these sort of catch ups. It's like, how often do we really get to sit down and have a conversation? When we're coaching or training. Yep. It's difficult. You might get a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there. Yeah. But we've actually had a chance to really sort of debrief all the different things that have gone on.
Absolutely.
And then and we'll do it again in the future
for sure. And if you're in Thailand and you're looking for a discounted taxi service, I'm now running Risky Ray's scooters, so make sure you've got insurance. And
so hang on, we just before we finish. So they seriously, they obviously wouldn't check. So you actually got to ride these scooters around?
Yeah. So I was with Cooper and one of my really good mates, Pat. He's a high school buddy. We're in Koh Samui.
Yeah.
And the boys are like, get on the back of the scooter. I'm like, no friggin' way am I getting on the back of scooters with you, either of them. And they're like, come on, like, don't be such a pussy. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm just walking. So when I was in Koh Samui, I just got taxis everywhere. So when I got over to Phuket to Bang Tao, Cooper's like, dude, it's the wet season. There's hardly anyone on the roads. And it was a lot quieter. And he's like, just jump on. By this stage, my wife and my son had left. So I only had a few more days with the boys. Like, just get on the back. Don't be such a pussy. You're just a massive pussy. I'm like, Cooper, I don't care what you say, dude. I'm not getting on the back of the scooter. I'm not coming off this scooter and dying here in Thailand. And he's like, oh my God, what is wrong with it? So I said, well, if it's so safe, if there's no cars, then I'll drive. And he's like, fuck. And I go, are you keen or not? And he goes, I'm not going to say I'm keen, but I'll do it. So he let me drive, and it was so much fun. Like, it was pretty quiet. We mainly did back streets, and then we waited till like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. Honestly.
What could you see?
Enough.
Really?
Just enough, yeah, a little bit. It was pretty blurry, but I stayed slow. Cooper's on the back, and he's like, come on, old man, get off. Let me have the scooter back. He goes, oh, wow, how great's this? Burning around Phuket at 22 kilometers an hour. So, but I was I've never been able to drive.
Yeah.
And I'm on the roads. I loved it. Like, honestly, I'd have paid like $10,000 for this experience. And anyway, he's on the back and he's hanging on. And he's like, are we going to come off? Are we going to crash? And he's hanging on to me. I go, no, we're good. And I kept turning around. It's like beautiful weather. And I go, how come it's so foggy in Thailand? What's with all the fog? And he's like, fuck. So it was good fun, and we drove around, and we went and saw Percy one day, and Percy's like, no way, you're not letting him drive. And Cooper's like, yeah, he's driving everywhere. And then Percy goes, I go to Percy, jump on. And he's like, no chance in hell am I jumping on the back with you. But I was only going slow, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I had a ball. So we did a few little funny videos. But me and Cooper, like, whenever we're together, we're always like, yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, we always have so much fun. We always, have a laugh and enjoy. We're always like, he's always, taking the piss out of me nonstop, but it's a lot easier to take the piss out of him, actually. So he's always giving me a hard time, but then he ends up doing something really stupid. So it's we have a lot of fun together. But that was one of the highlights, actually, on the scooters. So yeah, if you're in Thailand, you need a discount, look me up, and I'll run you around.
Run around the tuk-tuk service.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Johnny.
See ya.